Da da da! What my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And today I was outside. Today I thought I'd go out and see if I could do a little bit of reselling, if I could pick something up inexpensive in order that I could resell it for profit. And it was a really amazing, actually, outing that I had today. I went out earlier this afternoon and I just got home, quickly had something to eat because, I cut off eating at 8 o'clock. It's working out so well for me. Maybe not in losing weight, technically, even though I have slowly lost a few pounds in it, but my sleeping and indigestion, and I am somebody who has always been an eater at night, right? That's when everything slows down. This is when I get that. It's like recess for me, or after school. That's more like it. It's after school, and then I go in and, right, I take in content that's entertaining. For you guys have been with me for any length of time, I love the metal detecting and the bottle digging and the magnet fishing and the hiking. And I love those outdoor videos. But of course, it is in the fact that, that I spend so much time in the lessons, right? Right when I woke up to these ideas, I only wanted to understand emotions. I wanted to understand what went wrong in my dynamic upbringing. And swoosh, oh yeah, I went into it. And I didn't really have much of a say in that. I just allowed myself to be pulled into the topics, grateful because I had no idea where to begin. Now, one of the very first things, and in going into that, before we go into that, I just wanted to say in that reselling, I got a few little ornaments. And I got speakers for my computer that work. So, my Bose speakers, I'm going to miss them. They were amazing speakers. It's not a cord because I tried to use the cords from the new one that I picked up today because I love my Bose speakers, but it didn't work. So I know it's in the mechanism, something inside. So I'm going to give them to my nephew. If he can fix them, he can have them. I am just happy because listening to my computer, especially when I'm listening to the lessons, it's important for me because I enjoy my lessons. It's not entertainment for me, but because of that dream, that wish, that want, that desire that I had to understand what went wrong in my childhood, in my upbringing, in my adulthood, right? And what was going on with waking up to some of these ideas. And I have no idea, just grace, right? I got pulled into it. And for a lot of people, the topic of the day, right? And I've been in it for 6 years, like deep, right? And in the very beginning, it was all about the narcissism. I had no idea what a narcissist was. I had no idea what an empath was, but it was explained to me quite quickly so that I understood where the beginnings of the lessons were going to start. I'm going to say that I had some say in the choices, in the topics that were being suggested to me. But like I said, I allowed myself to be drawn into the content. I didn't necessarily get to choose, right? The order of how the lessons came to me. And if they had come in any other order than what they had done, it would have been really, really confusing for me, right? It's like the prerequisites. That was the miracle of it, is that each lesson, each conversation, each experience that I had, right? Each content creator that came across my path with an idea, right? And it was in the perfect timing of that, right? It got me, this curious mind, right? But the first thing that I came into in the lessons, and this is what we're going into, I made messy notes. I don't usually do notes, but I really felt that this was something maybe we should talk about. I mean, I was in it for a long time. Narcissism, we're going to talk a little bit about that, right? And if you hung out with me for a while, because I come in and I share my lessons, you've heard me talk about narcissism, right? But as of recently, it's really hard for me to continue in those lessons. I do, but it's difficult only because of my own experiences and in my own relationships. And you guys know I come from a very dynamic family. And, I love my sisters more than anything. But in my own experiences, because this is what I do, I come in and the lessons are in my experiences. So I come in and I share my experience, I share my insights, I share the characters, right? Who I learn from. And maybe not as much as I could or I should, but I don't feel that guilt that we have in not giving credit where credit is due. That time will come. I understand that. What's important in the moment is that I get it, right? And like I said, when I first woke up to some of these ideas, oh my goodness, we're going on 6 or 7 years now. 6 or 7 years when I woke up to some of these ideas. And the first topics that I got thrown into, and I took my lessons seriously, like seriously, because right in the beginning you have to understand, you have to go with what is pulling you, what gets your curiosity and your interest, right? What you start compulsing about, right? And this is what narcissism. Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much. I'm doing great. I hope you're doing good tonight, too. So, tonight we're talking a little bit about narcissism. I haven't stuck on the topic, though I have mentioned it on occasion, but I think because it is in my experiences that maybe I should, right, talk about it. And even if I don't understand everything perfect, my idea is if I get that information out there, there might be somebody, maybe you, that might get it, that might have better resources and connections, that you might be able to use those lessons yourself, right? To push it out there. I am not a greedy grabber in what I share. What's most important is that it's shared. It's not, right? I have a very small audience. Okay, so let's get into the notes right off. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to start and if I'm going to jump in the notes, only because as the thoughts came to me, I wrote them down. So the first thing I wrote down here was the narcissistic collapse. And you guys know narcissism has been the topic of conversation for years and years and years. But because I come from a dynamic family, and because narcissism is one of those characters that I was brought up in, uh, archetypes that my family, each one of us, played our role. And not played our role by choice. I think for the most part, we didn't have any choice. And in fact, we probably didn't really know, well, we didn't know what was going on, right? For myself, I could understand and what was right and what was wrong, but I didn't have much of an influence in my family. If you guys have been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that my role in my family was scapegoat, and I just felt that I was unworthy and that whatever was coming to me, right, I deserved it in some way. But then again, I might have believed, and I knew for myself between right and wrong. And because I didn't have much say in my family, a lot of what my experience entailed, it just entailed me to have the experience. And I was not alone in that. And I'll get to that in the moment because it's way down at the bottom. But staying on narcissistic collapse, what that is when the empath leaves, or the empath sees it, understands it, confronts it, doesn't breaks free of those chains that hold us down, right? And I am a true believer that I would have ended up the narcissist if it wasn't for the love of my father, right? Lots of times in narcissistic upbringings, the other partner doesn't have any say in the matter. And lots of times, a child will grow up and blame the narcissist partner for not sticking up for them, for not saving them, because they were quite aware. They call them enablers, right? And we end up growing up because of that, because we hold that resentment. We grow up to be narcissists because we don't have that love and understanding. I had that, right? I had that. And if you guys have been with me again for any length of time, you know that my father was an empath. My mother was a borderline narcissist, and maybe she was just straight borderline codependent, and maybe the authority in my family was my father, right? As a child, I'm putting myself in those shoes of where I was in the moment, and I have to be honest in saying that, right, I didn't understand. All I knew is that I was tiptoeing in my own family, in my own existence, because, well, I was always in trouble. Even to this day, I always feel when I come in that I'm going to get in trouble for something. And grateful, right, in working with my brand, that hasn't been the case in any way at all. But within my studies and in my lessons, because I come from a dynamic family, because I am a hybrid, possibly, they call them indigos, they call them half breeds, right? That that we have traits of both, right? So even though I am an empath, I have narcissistic traits. You guys have heard me say so many times that I'm not a big believer in turning the other cheek. That is not a very empathic trait. Empaths are usually, right, kind of cautious about coming forward. Even in my own brand, this is something that most empaths really have to stretch to be able to do because it's frightening, and empaths are non-conflict for the most part, and we don't want to hear the feedback in the comments, right? All these kind of things make us nervous because we're naturally on edge all the time anyway. Again, like I said, I'm always thinking that I'm about to get in trouble for something, right? So this is only the first one. I got about 10 of them here. I'm not rolling my eyes. It takes as long as it takes, right? But narcissistic collapse came into my life, right? And it brought me to the understanding that I only have control over my own actions, my own thoughts, my own beliefs. And I can't force that on anybody. And I had picked up traits, right? We learn from the people that we surround ourselves with. We are the people that we surround ourselves with. I wasn't the only empath in that family. My father was, right? But in saying, that narcissistic borderline um, was not the only one in the family either. I would have to say a lot of my personality traits kind of lie in between that borderline, and well, not now, right? It is in the shadow work that we get to resolve some of these issues because, right, I would be delving in to the other aspects of my life if I thought that I could force somebody to change, force somebody to let go of not the controlling parts, because we have to be controlling, right? But controlling in our own actions, our own emotions, our own thoughts, right? Not in others. And this was a lot of the lessons that I had to take in because again, I had picked up these things in my own life just because of the people that I surrounded myself with. Now, having those little traits, I was never narcissistic, but I was extremely controlling. I was extremely self-protective and very hypervigilant in my family. But like I said, it could have very easily been a different story for me if I wasn't codependent on my father, if I didn't cling to my father's life, if I didn't allow my father to be the example for me, right? I could have easily have been the narcissist in my family. There is no question in my mind of that. And in this moment, I've not discussed this, right? Because it's very personal. It's very humbling, scary, heartbreaking. Oh, right? But collapses are going on, right? Everywheres, right? Even if you're not a narcissist, if you have controlling traits, you're going to find yourself in these lessons, right? I strongly believe that, we are supposed to be the narcissist and the empaths. We're supposed to be together to heal each other, right? The narcissist to be able to be a little bit more sensitive, to better understand their own limits in their control, right? And actually to be able to soften a little bit in those lessons and to avoid becoming full-blown narcissists. We know majority rules, you guys. And what has been the topic of discussion for the past half a dozen years? Narcissism. And I don't participate in that bashing of the narcissist, because even within my own family, in the people that I love, those controlling, I know better than you, do as I say, not as I do traits come from people I love, souls that I love, from the half breeds, right? From the indigos. And I wrote the other one down here, hybrids, right? And it's important that we get to that point, because that's the next stage of evolution, is that mixture. And that's why, right, the world has been led in lessons, right? Difficult lessons going on for a very, very long time now, right? And we're just not getting it, right? Because we are so pig-headed and stubborn and have these very strong ideas. But, right, we're being broken down, all of us, in that. And I had my I had mine. You guys have been with me for a very long time. You guys know that I went through my own experience, but that was to break down those very strong traits that I had picked up along the way. I'm not the only indigo in that family, right? There are 4 of us girls that were born of that relationship. But they didn't become codependent and dependent on the sensitive parent like I did, right? My sister's Tracy was my mother's favorite. She was golden child. And so she got different lessons than I got, right? And like I said, it could have been a different story. She could have been in my place and I could have been in her place. And the idea that I woke up when I did was so that I believe this, so that I could be the example to my sisters, to help them get through this collapse that they are also going through. But because my because the empathic traits are not as rooted in them as the narcissist traits are rooted in them. Those negative traits have only allowed, right, the negative to come into their life, and they're struggling really, really hard. And I'm being witness to that, and it's just heartbroken to me, because I feel I've come so far that I could, right? I could help. But nobody is asking for assistance, and I've offered in that, and they don't want to hear it, right? Because they're very independent, strong-minded, controlling, borderline narcissistic in their own lives. And I don't mean to laugh at that, because it's awful, right? these experiences that they're having in their lives. And all I can do is bear witness to that and do my very best to be the example for them that they can get through it. I believe that it's a second chance, right? That God says that's it. Because the majority rules, and because it has been the topic of discussion for the past half a dozen years all over the place, right? 6 years ago, nobody knew what a narcissist was, and now pretty much everybody does. And not only that, it's more prevalent now than what it was when my generation was growing up. And if I can be the example for my sisters, and then maybe they could wake up to some of these ideas, that maybe we could team up in that and help others. And now I'm only talking about this because I don't fully understand my role in this, right? And I'm right. And if you have insights in there, message me, you guys. Email me. My email's down below because right? And even in the comments and in sharing that, then others could learn by that too, right? Okay. You guys hear me say all the time, we are all in the same storm. We're all having these narcissistic and controlling traits burnt out of us. That's the plan. I am convinced, and it can be done. Oh my goodness, right? There is going to be so much. Oh God, I couldn't even imagine how far we could jump in those, how far we can leap in the experiences that we're having right now, that possibly we could just like snap out of it, that in a moment that one person understands, right? That one person could explain it, that then it could resolve itself, or in our own choices, right? In free choice, we can delve into those lessons for ourselves and do that work and heal ourselves, right? Sydney doesn't heal. I've tried. I reveal as it's been revealed to me. And it's as simple as that. Each one of us is responsible for our own healing. And yes, there are gifts out there, and I've been the recipient of so many of them. And that's why, right, I'm talking about this topic today because, right, I'm really feel that, this is why I've been woken up to some of these lessons, to let people know that the narcissists are not bad guys, right? They are not. It is in their upbringing, it is in the epigenetics, it is in those family, cultural, right? Religious ideas, political ideas, and they are pounded into us by our caregivers, right? And we grow up in that. But like I said, it could have been a different story for me, right? I could have also grown into it, would have been right. Right? It could have been that way because you guys hear me say all the time how I butt heads and how I don't turn the other cheek, right? I do have, well, I'm sure you guys, if you've been with me for any length of time, right, you probably noticed yourself and wondered how I made it as far as I did. But that's because, right, I had those other lessons too, right? That I had people in my life who loved me and cared for me and expressed that to me daily. So I was able to stay soft, right? Still had those traits, but I was able to stay soft in that, right? We're all in the same storm, you guys. We're just all in different boats. And the idea is not to witch hunt the narcissist, right? We clearly see and know that they're there, and they know that we know that they're there. And they know we see them. They know we experience them. There's so many lessons out there. It's hard, right, for us to fall into that. But I think we are meant to fall into it, but to fall into it with the love, like the love that I fell into with my father. And it's those healing understandings, those relationships, right? That sometimes we take advantage of, sometimes we dictate to, sometimes we truly do damage and hurt them. But if we could go in there and just be the example for others and just love on them in that process, now is when they need us more than they've ever need us, because right, there are collapses going on everywheres. And you could say that you're not a narcissist, and it's quite possible that you're not a narcissist, but you could have narcissistic traits. You can have unhealthy, controlling habits that need to be burnt out of you. Just like, right, that I needed to have these things burnt out of me so that I could properly understand. But, I thought they were just lessons for me. I didn't recognize how important it was to let people know the narcissists are not the enemy. They are not. They are us. They are the opposite extremes. And not only are they narcissistic in the extremes, they are darks in their lightnesses. They are darks touching the light for the very first time. Can you imagine how painful, how scary that must be? Right? I'm a light in my darkness. And I know what it's like in those darknesses, right? And, you know, I can't be made to look like the good guy, because the empaths, right? They picked up these traits, and they could be just as conniving and sneaky and vindictive as the narcissist can be. And that's the truth. So why is the narcissist the only one being singled out? And right, I'm glad I don't have a big audience, because I probably get really slammed with a lot of hate, because a lot of us have had awful experiences, right? Painful, damaging experiences. So damaging that maybe for ourselves, we passed that along. We were the evidence, right? We were the experience in somebody else's life, and probably not in a good way, right? If you're like me and a little bit of that butting the head and not turning the other cheek. But these were lessons that I was meant to conquer. I was meant to learn how to stand up for myself. I was meant to learn to hold my own and not turn the other cheek, to point out and mirror back to others the pain, right? Mirror back to them and sometimes, you heard that saying, you get what you give, right? That's part of being the evidence too. Okay. Uh yeah, leading by example. This is the only thing that I can do in the moment, because these kind of conversations that I have here with you guys, right? They're not conversations that my sisters are interested in delving into. That's how come I know that I am meant to be the example for them, right? Because there's no way I can't use the same tactics that I used before, because they've been burnt out of me. The only thing that I do have left is the person that I am now, and the understandings in all those years of lessons that I have received, right? And I don't know anybody out there who is sticking up for the narcissists. They are so singled out, like a witch hunt, right? It's kind of like, who's without sin casts the first stone. I got that wrong. I know I got that wrong, right? But you get the gist of it, right? That we're looking for people to hold the blame, just like I was meant to hold the blame as an empath, as you were too, if you're empathic or highly sensitive in that way. But my parents gave me a gift, right? That was a difficult relationship that the two of them had. Can you imagine, right? My father adapted and conquered in his own way. But in that, us kids struggled a little bit, right? Um, he was a commercial fisherman. He would go away for months at a time, 2 or 3 times a year. And when he was home, he worked the night shift because he was a cabbie. And so we always, when he was home, he loved spending time with us. And this is where these attachments and these examples that he was for me, right? Just as much as my mother was the example for my sister, but my mother was also the example for me, right? She was. In her relationship with me, it said everything, right? But also, right, it doesn't serve in pointing that out to them, right? It doesn't serve, and it only agitates, and it makes that relationship that I truly feel, right, that we come back with the same people. And that group might be huge. I probably have not even right met them all, or have been a member of a family in those relationships. But we do come back. And I believe that the reason we do rub badly with some of these members in our family is because, right, we have done each other wrong. In our evolution, we can only get better in that, right? We can only get better, right? That moving forward, it just doesn't mean live day to day the exact same way. It's to learn, it's to get better, it's to understand. And right, maybe you woke up to your own ideas. Maybe you didn't wake up to the idea of that one thing that you wanted so much, right? Was to understand what went wrong. That was my wish. If everybody got to wake up to a wish, I remember vocalizing it even, right? This was what I wanted. I didn't know it was going to expand into this, but it had to expand, and I did understand, and I did get the lessons, And I did get the opportunity, right, to work with forgiveness and work with gratefulness and work with optimism, right? Now I'm opening up enough that maybe we can work with hope, right? Hope that by being the example in prioritizing these relationships that could have swung a different way. It could have, for any one of us, it could have been a different story. I could have been golden child. I could have been the narcissist, right? But in butting heads and in not turning the other cheek and calling people out, you only make yourself the target. You make yourself the enemy. You make yourself the person that, right, that gets to be dumped on. Okay, next. So, this idea of the narcissistic collapse, I think it's going on right now. I think we called it forth because by majority, God got the message, right? And that's where the course correction is. That is where the course correction is. And people are finding themselves in difficulties. If you look at those difficulties, I bet you anything that if you look at the emotional part of it, if you can look at your own experiences in that, you'll recognize it for yourself. And maybe that can be a beginning point for where you can start in that and just accepting your role in it. Just like I had to accept my role. I am grateful. I am so grateful, right? But I can't imagine that those lessons were just for me. And just like anybody else, I was done with listening to the lessons on narcissism. I was up to here with it, but not up to here because it was so thick and heavy and prevalent, right, in the topic of conversations. But I was done with it because I didn't feel that it was truly true, right? Because in the next life, what if somebody else in this life, they were a narcissist, but in the next life, they had my position in my family. We'll just call it, had my position in my family. Then they, in the next lifetime, would be an empath, right? And that's because of the mix, right? The mix of the light and the dark, right? I'd love, I love these topics that are so important, right? Because we have an opportunity to really heal, I believe, right? And, I think the world has moved the way it has so that in somehow the empaths and the narcissists could come together in a way. But the only way they could come together is if one or both of them was asleep to what was going on, and then just have the empath, right, shine in the narcissist's life. And then the narcissist helps the empath to be able to hold their own, to stand and root in their own strengths and understandings, to be able to not turn the other cheek, to be able to butt heads with what's not true for them, right? They're mutual gifts in that. But sometimes, right, that friction is like sandpaper, and we don't want to be around that. And that's the relationship that I had with my mother. So she was also in that pain as much as I was, right? At that time, I wasn't in a position, I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, right? And that opportunity to help my mother is, right, not possible. That relationship was severed, and she's gone now, right? Well, she's back now, but right, those opportunities for me to be the example for her, they're not existent. So guaranteed, I'm pretty certain that she's coming back, because negative can only welcome in the negative, can't it? And until you have that parent that loves and dotes and offers up lessons in strength, right? Great insights. My dad brought us up on his quotes. Quotes. Can you imagine bringing up a family just on quotes? Every time there was a discrepancy or there was a lesson, there was a quote for that. It was almost like a language in our family. And those were the values that my dad had rooted into the family that we all had to abide by. We didn't all abide by it, but those were the rules of the household. And when my dad was home, we followed those to a T, guaranteed, right? Different story if he wasn't home, but right, when he was home, we followed those to a T. And it served me also in that. It helped a little bit when he was away, because he he set them as rules. So even though those rules were constantly being broken, they weren't to that, how do you say it? It was right on the line. You know what I mean? It was like one step over and that was abuse, right? And or one step forward and it was love and fun and adventure. So all of us were just always right there. And when my dad was home, like I said, we had base values. We lived by that, and we could basically manage in that coexistence that we had. And there were six of us, right? The four girls and my mom and dad. And so my ideas, because these lessons that I've gone through, I can see, right? So many people, I can see it everywhere, and I can offer up a little bit of insight and be the example for others. And I could even ask, right? I could ask if I could help, but nobody on the norm. I don't get to have these conversations with my sisters. I'm usually shut down pretty I'm shut down pretty fast in them. So I respect that, only because I understand, right? I can only control my actions, my own thoughts and my own beliefs. But I do my little bit when I can, and in helping out when I can, and being the example for my sisters, because when those lessons are said and done, I believe they'll get a choice, right? And that choice won't be one or the other. I believe it will be a combination of the both, right? Narcissists won't be so hard, and the empath won't be so soft, right? I believe this, right? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I boxed off this little thing here too, because in my relationship, in my dynamic family, I do have problems in labeling because of the two extremes, right? Understanding we are a little bit of both, but that's our evolution. This is what evolution is. We are not Neanderthals anymore. We are not warring. We're not warring indigenous. We are not cannibals anymore, right? We are not we are not picking on people like we used to. As a whole, we are softening up, but individually, we are still finding ourselves with these characters who don't recognize who they are or what they could be or what they need to resolve in the issues that arise, right? Whether you're an empath or whether you're a narcissist, right? For myself, oh my goodness, I've had so many sneaky moments in my life, right? And I recognize that I have the capability to be that person, right? I do. That's what you call triggering in those difficulties that we have, and then we express ourselves in those triggers. So I recognize it in myself. And as of recently, I was triggered. I think actually I was triggered in it yesterday, and I was it yesterday or today, and I went, oh, I know what it was. It was a comment. I was right looking for speakers, so I was thrifting them. And I was looking for stock for reselling, so did some thrifting today. I went to a couple of thrift stores and right checked them out, see if I could find some stock to sell. And but I lost the lesson just now. Come back to me. Come back to me if it's meant to be expressed. It does. It wants. Maybe it doesn't. I don't have anything in it at all. Oh, okay. It came back. So I was looking for directions in bus service to get to these three thrift stores. And when I did that, I hit on the website of one of the one of the thrift stores. I used to work there. And it just went to their main page, so where the comments and stuff are. And I started reading a couple of comments just because I've never read the comments on our store before. And oh, some of them were so amazing. I've had so many beautiful, beautiful comments when I worked there. And then I came to this one comment, and I thought it was a recent one because it was at uh, the next page. It was right up at the top underneath a recent photo, and so I thought it was a recent one. And they were talking about how the store was terrible and the service was terrible, and then they went in, and I thought to myself, oh, right, I was the evidence when I left. I was the evidence, right? And I knew that me leaving was gonna hurt the store, right? Right? Not tooting my own horn, but I guess I am, right? And I felt that little bit of contentment in the fact that they weren't doing well without me. Here's the kicker though. I continued down the comment, right? And I recognized the customer experience in that comment. And that comment was directly referencing me. It was a comment about me, a negative comment about me. I recognized it. I went, what? And I got triggered right away because I prided myself on customer service, and I prided myself in all the compliments and the community I built. But this one experience, it was a bad experience, and that person decided to give me a Google review on that. And I remembered being called into the office and discussing the situation, and I talked about it, and I explained it, and I held to protocol in that. But of course, there's two sides to every story, and there's beautifying in that story and enhancing stories. And I got triggered in that, and I didn't get to have a say in that, except in that office experience that I had, was being able to explain it. And I got triggered. Oh my goodness. I felt awful. And I'm looking at this comment and go, oh yeah, rah, 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 and rah, 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 rah. And then I stopped myself in doing that, and I went, oh my goodness. I allowed myself to be triggered by a comment that was like 2 or 3 years old. And I don't even work for the company anymore. But it was only because my feelings were hurt, right? That I didn't have an opportunity to say my piece, to actually explain how it was, right? So this was purposely a lesson for me today, because that comment was, like I said, 2 or 3 years old. How come it popped up right at the very top of the page for me to experience? Because it was meant to show me where I was at in the moment, right? Meaning Cindy still needs work, but right? It'll be a lifetime achievement. Even if it's achieved in this lifetime, it's probably, oh, most definitely not. It's going to be in the next lifetime, or the next lifetime, or the next lifetime. But like I said, right, that we have to understand we can't witch hunt the narcissist, because I tell you, in your next lifetime, right, if you believe in reincarnation, right, and even if you don't, it may happen anyway, whether you know it or not, whether you want it or not. You might find yourself in that same position, right? That one life you're an empath, the next life you're a narcissist, the next life you're a borderline, right? Like you just, and that's the roller coaster, and that's where the lessons lay, right? I think we're beyond the witch hunts now, right? But majority rules, and I get it. And because so many, right? We woke up the topic of narcissism. We are healing that, right? We invited whatever's in charge, whoever's in charge, to come in and give each one of us those lessons, to either help us soften or to help us not harden up, not to go cold, but to be able to stand our own ground, to give us the courage, right? The bravery, the determination, the confidence to be able to say our truths, right? Yeah, so I don't know how well I explained that, but to give people a different perspective, because I understand if it hits, you may feel it to be true. And if you're a narcissist, it might help you to feel better about where you are, and not to be so defensive that, everybody is out to get you. Um, and for the empaths, so we don't get so high and righteous, right? That we are not the be all to end all, that we are not, right? I was an empath when I wasn't woken to any of these ideas, but I was scattered, and I was struggling, and I was lost, right? I was lost. And those lessons brought me to an even keel, enough that I could set up boundaries, that I could work with values, that I could be able to come in and allow myself to be pulled in to whatever lesson that I was needing in that moment, right? Because like I said, it's the prerequisites, and it's bypassing if you don't take the lessons in order. Because if you're hearing this lesson right now and you haven't even woken up to any of the ideas, you're just going to look at me like I'm some kind of crazy lady. Right? Right. But if you are woken up to some of these ideas, you might feel the truth in that, right? And I think, because we've been together for so long, some of us, right? Decades, or not decades, but decade, right? 11 years here on YouTube, that you would know that I'm telling the truth in that. And yes, right? These narcissistic experiences are beyond horrifying and damaging to all people involved in those relationships, right? And I'm not downplaying that, but the idea is not to blame. The idea is not to witch hunt, not to point the fingers, and not to be holier than thou. And I try really hard not to be that, right? And that's why it's important to come in, even with just messy notes. I don't normally even come in with the notes, you guys, right? But I felt it was important. The lessons that are coming to me, the experiences that are coming to me, the conversations that are coming to me, it's all revolving around this one topic that I didn't want to talk about it because I was so full of it. Like, I'm so full of the narcissism, right? But the idea is we're not done with it. We're just starting with it, right? We're trying to be more balanced. And again, like I said, it is in our evolution that we get better. And that should make us feel like a good thing, right? It should make us feel that we are welcome to the party, whether we are narcissistic or empathic. Now I'm only speaking for those two groups, right? But they're two very important groups, and I really believe that the answers for where we're sitting right now and what we're in the midst of and what we're going into, I believe that if we can kind of, right, be a little bit more understanding in that, rather than pointing the fingers, laying the blame, right? And playing those games, right? I don't even have to say what those games are because I think we're all quite aware of the games between the sensitives and the narcissists, the light and the dark. The people I'm talking to are the light in their darknesses and the darknesses in their lights. We are all the same. We were just born in the different experience, right? And in that experience, that's what created us in this lifetime. But that doesn't mean in the next lifetime. Maybe if we get it right, right? In this lifetime, wouldn't that be amazing? Right? Wouldn't that be amazing? Okay, you guys, I'm not pulling a card today, right? I decided even before I did my live that I wasn't going to pull a card on that. I was going to try and stay in this topic. There was probably more to it. I may feel called to talk about it again, but I'm optimistic and I'm hoping that, that you guys that who might understand these topics might understand, you know, these groups a little bit better than I do, that you might have a gift, a little bit of insight that might click perfectly like a puzzle piece into what I just said. And then maybe you can be the example for others also. And then eventually, right, we have a whole world of examples for each other. And then, right, we can go back to what we were meant to do. Because I don't want to be separated from the people that I care about, right? Whether we are labeled in a personality or not. If I love you, I love you and I want to make sure that you get to come along for this party. We're all invited, but that invitation has a dress code. Wow! That was a good way. That was a good analogy. Yes, that was a good analogy. This party has a dress code, and whether we choose to move in to that or not, it's to each one of us. But for those of you who can be the example, and there's lots of amazing examples, I wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for those examples. I'm so grateful for them. But yeah, okay. I got that off my chest. I hope that helps somebody. You guys, I'm going to come back into my live myself and watch it again. Step Van Det, thank you so much. No judgment. That's the thing, right? But I don't think we can go through this process without judgment. I think judgment possibly was set in place by a hardcore narcissist, right? So that we don't catch on, right? Because he didn't catch on. And now we have an opportunity to get a little bit of this work done a little bit properly so that we can create, right, an amazing world that we were meant to be born into and be reborn into, and every lifetime be better and better and better. I am grateful for my lessons. Let's hope Cindy's out of it now, that when I come in next time, right, I won't struggle as hard as I did last time. That possibly my sisters won't struggle as hard as they did in this lifetime, right? And especially in the past 6 years, right? We're not out of it yet, but, right? I believe we were supposed to work together. I really do. But sometimes, right, because we rub each other like sandpaper, because we're just not on the same step in our evolutions, right? It becomes a little bit uncomfortable. But that's the idea, right? I knew from day one it wasn't going to be easy. And I was reminded it wasn't going to be easy today. So, right, that's all I've got for you tonight. I'm going to enjoy my coffee. I went to Tim Hortons, got myself a cup of coffee before I came home from my thrifting. But, in my insights today, I thought I really had to get that off my chest, right? We can't help who we love, right? But there's a difference between love and limerence, okay? And that will probably be the topic tomorrow, because I'm going to go into some of these relationships and give each one tips, right? In helping us be able to get along with each other. And yeah, good idea. I'll think about it tomorrow. Maybe I'll be more precise in my scribbles when it comes to the notes, you guys, and be a little bit more professional. But that's the idea. I can only come in, right, as Cindy. And in this moment, Okay, you guys. Have a great night. Thank you so much, everybody, for popping into my live. And if you're just walking in the door and putting your feet up, right, grab yourself a cup of coffee. I hope this serves. I hope, right, my narcissists are not super angry with me and my empaths are not kind of ticked too because, I told him to stop being so righteous. Okay, you guys, have a great night. We're going to see you on Monday. I'll be back on Sunday night for Chatters Live. If you want to come in, I have the most amazing crew on Chatters Live. Eugene recently became part of that crew. But if you want to come in on Sunday night, 7:30 Central. If not, I'll be back at Monday, 9 p.m. Central. Have a great night.